Maybe it's on me. I should have known better. I should have assumed that the thing I paid for my whole working life, that my family and likely yours has funded for generations, beautiful places that don't bully you into spending endless money to experience glorious, unfettered nature, national parks. Yeah, I should have figured that one day they'd be gone. Or threatened, rather. I just always thought I'd have more time, I thought that I could spend my older, retired years driving all across this beautiful country and discover all the good air, good water, and good vibes. I took these landmarks for granted. I assumed they'd always be there. I'm a full adult, and the closest I've gotten to Yosemite is that Mac update from a few years back. Our current administration seems content to simply take away this greater good, or at least greatly diminish it by opening it up for logging and drilling, generally things that Mother Nature isn't down with. But I have to ask, how is this better? Hi, I'm Akilah Hughes. You may know me as the founding host of Crooked Media's What a Day podcast, the host of Rebel Spirit with iHeart, or as that lady who's been posting funny stuff on the internet for nearly 20 years. And this is How Is This Better? A new show from Courier where I'm asking the only question that matters about changes being made and suggested about the world around us. Our topics range from politics to tech, to art, to science, to infinity, maybe beyond. Anyway, today I'm asking, how is it better to privatize these lands? It's a good question that needs an answer. So let's find out, shall we? If Project 2025 is to be believed, and so far they've stuck to the letter, the plans for the national parks really hinge on a repeal of the 1906 landmark legislation, the Antiquities Act, which grants the president the authority to protect public lands of historic or scientific value. For more than 100 years, this bipartisan act has been protecting 164 important locations. Here's a little more backstory on the parks. Up until the mid-1800s, the U.S. generally saw nature as something to overcome. Trees to be chopped, animals to be eaten, you get the gist. That was until George Catlin, a lawyer, painter, author, traveler, it's giving millennial levels of side hustles, started urging the government to come up with more specific policies protecting the land. Between him, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, heard of him, the idea began to catch on. And in 1864, Senator John Conness of California sought to protect Mariposa Big Tree Grove and Yosemite Valley. And that same year, Republican President Abraham Lincoln, who, to be honest, seemed pretty busy with that whole Civil War/slavery situation, signed it into law, giving California the land for, quote, public use, resort, and recreation, inalienable for all time. Republican President Teddy Roosevelt expanded on the idea, doubling the number of national parks from 5 to 10, using the Antiquities Act we just talked about to create national monuments, little places like the Grand Canyon and Devil's Tower, and crucially established the National Forest Service. Fast forward to now, and Republican President Donald Trump is trying to privatize the land that everyone fought so hard to protect for basically the opposite of conservation. Since we're in an all-out assault on science and history in favor of pseudoscience and whitewashed history, no doubt this is going to be an issue sooner than later. So to get a better sense of what's going on, I asked a few people whose job it is to know.
Most of my job is communicating with the administration and Congress to get them to do the right thing, fund parks, protect them, make more of them.
This is Kristen Brengel, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Parks Conservation Association. The NPCA is a dope nonprofit dedicated to supporting our national parks, from defending wildlife to preserving the natural sounds and clarity of the night sky over these lands. What is their plan?
I think we knew that they were going to come after the federal workforce generally, and so it's not a total surprise that they came after the Park Service. But what they found was that when you actually look at studies about which federal employees are the most popular, national park rangers are the highest on the list of the most loved and respected. I think what they found out was that they really attacked the wrong agency and the wrong federal employees. And so there was an incredible amount of backlash.
Just a quick refresher. The Valentine's Day Massacre was February 14th, 2025, when the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, then run by Elon Musk, who moved fast, broke things, and left as peculiarly as he came,
I think I've done enough,
if that can be believed, decided that it was inefficient to have any National Park Service maintaining the 85 million acres of public lands. He unceremoniously sent around 1,000 probationary employees an email and gave them the boot.
Wildly unpopular, and they ended up, because of a court order, having to reinstate all of them, but they weren't even going to fully reinstate them.
Wow.
It took them still 4 hours to decide to reinstate all of them.
Hearing about the park rangers who are just getting started and are having their dreams of taking care of this land dashed against the rocks by someone with the screen name Big Balls, yeah, that sucks. Because DOGE isn't just targeting national parks directly, they're also targeting AmeriCorps, which is a program that feeds directly into the national parks employment pipeline. I tried to read more about AmeriCorps, but the website is already leading to a bunch of dead links.
How I came to parks is through AmeriCorps, which is a federal service program that leverages the power of young people to support a number of kind of public services across the country. So there are AmeriCorps service programs in fields as diverse as, public health, education, food security, environmental work, certainly disaster relief.
This is Adam Auerbach. He is currently finishing his degree in environmental policy at CU Boulder, while also working part-time for public lands nonprofits. He recently penned an op-ed for National Parks Traveler and was quoted in the New York Times as the fallout from the Trump administration's attacks on the parks made headlines.
I'm formerly a park ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park. I spent 3 seasons there doing what we call interpretation, working in the visitor centers to help people, plan safe and rewarding trips. Your ranger-led hike, your talk at the visitor center about bears or whatever it is, you're talking the campgrounds, helping keep people safe and keeping people educated.
How does it make you feel now, knowing what they're doing to AmeriCorps? I visited their website. They've gutted all the links. I'm assuming that means that the program is no longer. What would it have meant for you to have that opportunity ripped away?
It's really devastating. I don't think we're quite at the place where AmeriCorps is totally no longer, but I think it's very much under threat, and I'm deeply concerned, as so many alums in my network and more broadly who have been really profoundly impacted by this program. I was 20, I was without a way. I'd done 2 years of college, but I hadn't found myself, I hadn't found my path, the opportunity to travel and the opportunity to find purpose alongside other young people, like serving the country through, in my case, doing habitat restoration, wildfire fuels protection for the public. It's such a hard counterfactual question to even know where I would be without this program. So much of my identity and my personhood has been in public lands management, and I found that through AmeriCorps. So many people have found their path through this program that offers professional development, but also belonging. My heart breaks for the young people who are deprived of the chance to serve, and just also the cruelty of it all.
This kind of cruelty is something that came up in my conversation with Kristen Brengel too.
One of the things I got welled up in tears over in the last few weeks was killing a generation of park stewards. People who are going to take care of these places next after we're gone. That is painful.
Painful and undignified.
One of the programs that has been fully disbanded was a program called NCCC, which is a residential program for young people. So people who are 18 to 24, they might not have somewhere else to live when they get kicked out with no expectation, right? Like day of, they're told this program is canceled. Not only is AmeriCorps service, great for the country because people are doing, in the case of that program, like disaster relief, literally responding to hurricanes and floods and tornadoes. We need that support as a society, but we're also supporting these young people and giving them a path. And in many cases, giving them literally a roof over their head while they serve their country. So it's okay, not only can you not serve, not only can you not do professional development, you don't have a place to live tonight. It'd be one thing to dismantle this program, but there are ways to do it with less unnecessary cruelty to the young people who just want to serve their country and advance their own lot in life.
Another problem with the privatization of land, besides the devastation, it would cause to the environment, is that the land belongs to U.S. citizens. Did you think much about that before, this current administration came into power? About the possibility that it might not actually be ours forever?
There's always been fringe interests throughout my lifetime of knowledge around public lands, this movement towards privatization of public lands. But it's never felt like it was actually going to happen, potentially, until the current moment, right? Those voices have always been there, but in this moment, this administration is really deeply signaling that they intend to privatize our public lands. That's the thing that I think is so asinine about all this is They say it's good for the economy, but it's like public lands are already great for the economy.
Right. Being able to breathe is great.
Well, right. But 3.1% of employment in this country is dependent on our outdoor recreation economy. And that's 2.3% of our GDP annually. And you know what that's bigger than is the entire net sum of oil and gas and mining combined. So when they say they want to privatize our public lands, they want to do it for oil and gas and mining. But actually, our public lands are already better for the economy.
That's right.
You can't make it make sense. And like you said, all the other benefits to like public health and wellness and the environment and the air that we breathe and the water that we drink.
Yeah. Pretty bleak, I know. But still, there's that selfish question I've been harboring. This is a selfish question, but do you think I'll ever get to see Yosemite or any national park, considering how quickly they seem hell-bent on closing them?
Yes. And you'll be able to go and love and appreciate them, of course. Yeah, our national parks have stood the test of time in many administrations. We just want to make sure that we're not the generation that ruins things. You know, climate change is probably the biggest existential threat of the national parks. We need to address that as soon as we have more political fight in us to do that.
Ah, yes, the elephant in the room, the climate. Look, I'm all for wishful thinking, but this administration isn't just any old administration. They're gutting our government like a fish, all in the name of so-called efficiency. So if I want to see it, it looks like there's no time like the present. In the meantime, let's unpack, see what I did there? This whole climate change thing. Seems like a pretty big deal. Which is why it's great that we have this administration that believes in climate change and is fighting so hard to slow it down. It's bad enough that the Trump administration wants to cut down the national forests, drill for oil, and gut the Endangered Species Act to literally build where endangered species live. Sorry, bears. But add to that the complete climate denial and the commitment to catastrophic carbon emissions, and it's not looking good for the parks.
Hi, my name is Steve Beissinger. I'm a Professor Emeritus of Ecology and Conservation Biology at University of California, Berkeley.
Steve, along with his students and collaborators, has published over 175 articles towards the goal of understanding the influence of climate change. So climate change is not a small thing. What are the most significant ways that climate change is currently impacting the national parks?
In some national parks, the climate has changed such that the plants and animals there are no longer able to survive. So there have been species that have disappeared from those parks or are starting to disappear. They're sort of hollowing out.
Oof.
So, for example, in the Mojave Desert, Death Valley National Park, Joshua Tree National Park, Mojave National Preserve, we found a large decline in the bird species that are living there. They don't occupy nearly as many places as they did a century ago before the climate changed. And it's due to heating and drying. In Yosemite National Park, that warming and drying has actually pushed some species further upslope.
I let Steve know about my plans to hopefully, maybe someday, soon visit Yosemite.
You're hoping to go to Yosemite.
Yeah.
Yosemite Valley, it's fairly fragile. It's fragile enough that the numbers of tourists that wish to visit there are more than the facilities and the valley can sustain. And so they have to use a system to limit tourism moving into that area, limit cars going in there. So I could imagine, should one wish to privatize that part of the park, perhaps sell it off, I could imagine a big conflict between maintaining the beauty of Yosemite Valley and selling it off, maximizing the profits that would happen.
There's no question what Trump's plan will be. On his very first day in office this go-round, Trump promised to, quote, unleash America's affordable and reliable energy and natural resources. Ugh.
If those plans are to drill, baby, drill, then I think we're obviously going to be accelerating climate change just from that production.
One obvious bit of climate change we've experienced on the West Coast is fires. They're bigger, hotter, less predictable, and affecting land near national parks, even up in Northern California.
The frequency and intensities of fires as a result of climate change, has become a major problem for us in our lifetime. And in the lifetime of our children, it's only going to get worse unless we work a lot harder to try and reverse these processes. In addition, we're seeing stronger and more lasting drought conditions. That influences water available for agriculture, water available for our urban areas, and fires are part of that recipe as well. And then it's also led to drying conditions in our rivers and streams that have caused the loss of salmon populations and other threatened fishes. Our national parks, we are seeing these kinds of impacts.
It's clear that in an increasingly hot and changing world, now is really not the time to cede ground to an indifferent at best and greedy at worst presidential administration. What do you wish the general public understood about the changes to the national parks that are being proposed by the Trump administration? Because I think that you're right. Obviously, people like the national parks. They like the idea of national monuments. They use them, Hundreds of millions of people go and experience them every year. But this is an issue that I think is kind of in the flood of issues. So what do you hope that people start paying attention to when it comes to this issue?
People don't very often understand that our public lands are not just national parks, right? Like you said, we have national monuments, we have U.S. Forest Service land, we have the Bureau of Land Management. All these agencies have recreation as a part of their mission. We need to not just keep our parks, but we need to keep the whole network. Because our parks actually depend on the whole network. I used to work at Rocky Mountain National Park, which is surrounded 360 degrees by U.S. Forest Service land. And your experience there is dependent on a healthy, public, not private, extractive Forest Service, right? Wildlife know no political boundaries. A lot of the trails weave in and out. The Forest Service is, world-class expertise in wildland fire management. We should all be really worried about that, what we're seeing with the dismantling of these agencies around our ability to stay safe from fire. I think it's important that the public knows that, undoubtedly they're going to start with the push to sell off, not our parks, right? They would never start there. That would be totally
Yeah, it's not going to be Mark Zuckerberg's Yosemite yet.
Right. So, but and we need to nip the problem in the bud, and we need to really figure out how to show up against the movement to sell off. At first, it'll probably be our Bureau of Land Management land and our Forest Service land. But, they might, as they find that they can subsidize tax cuts for the billionaire class by selling off public lands, they're not going to want to stop at Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service. And my concern is that eventually it will make it to parks. And the other thing that I think is really important for people to understand, the visitor experience in parks is not only down to the most frontline visitor services. Even if you visit a park this summer and the visitor center is still open and the trail is still open and maybe you have a good bathroom experience, that's coming at a really extreme cost. And the Park Service has this mission, and we need to provide for public enjoyment today, but also preserve and protect for all generations into the future. If we're not doing research, if we're not supporting wildlife, all of the research that goes into effective governance of parks, you might be able to hobble through a season or two in it to look okay to the outside. But that doesn't mean what's actually happening behind the scenes is okay, and that we're not facing really irreparable harm to our parks for generations to come.
That's an incredible point, and very much mirrors what's happening with the rest of the country anyway, right?
Yeah, well said.
Armed with all this history and context, I packed my car and tried to make my way to Yosemite. It was a beautiful drive, can definitely say that. But you know what they say about best laid plans. Turns out paper maps don't tell you that it's a 9-hour drive. And no, this wasn't even a Coachella weekend, so I probably needed to make a more thought out plan for me and my dog. Total honesty, I hate that I'm being burdened with this. That's the whole point of maintaining them. And I'm gonna go soon, but let me know in the comments how long you think I actually have till the Grand Canyon is a Tesla cop robot dealership. And I know, climate change and a bum economy was already making my retirement plan to see all that natural beauty harder by the minute. But surely drilling for oil and the inevitable disasters and oil spills that will follow isn't some better solution. And none of us should have to worry if this president or the next is gonna sell it off to the highest bidder, because it's our land and because we deserve nice things. And the national parks might be the nicest thing this country has going for it.